Hey, Irene.
Hi.
You made it. Okay. Let me start to bring students in. I want to just take some time to say hello and run through any slides if you wanted me to, but I think you're all set to go. Okay. All right.
Hello.
Hey, Jen, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you. How's everyone doing?
Hey, Jen, let me just chat with you separately, possibly. Let me see if I can find a chat.
Sure.
Where people are joining in.
No problem. Have a good night, everyone. I'm so sorry for the mix-up. It was good to see your faces. This was just me saying hello, and you will be seeing me again. We still have 2 more sessions together. Bye, everyone.
All right. I have to say, there are so many folks that we have for our professional development program that I have to say, I'm a little jealous. I didn't have so many people come in to give me such great input, such great recommendations about the world. And I have to say, today, our presenter, Irene Papajohn, is no different. I'm still seeing people come in. So if you see me sort of stutter a bit, it's because I'm trying to make sure that everybody is in class and gets the most out of this session. Today's focus is on the tech landscape. Of course, something that's super important for all of you. Finding where you fit in within tech can be very challenging. The industry is as broad as it is deep. And many of you, at least when you've had conversations with me, you've had questions such as, what does the tech space look like? Where do I start applying for positions? What kind of role is a good fit for me? And even like, do I have the skills for this position? So in today's session, we're going to try to give you a roadmap so that you can get started in your journey in tech. Irene Papajohn, who for me is at the top left of my screen, hey Irene, is at the Career Management Center at Columbia Business School, and she will be presenting the highlights of the tech landscape, especially if you're looking to join as a software engineer. But of course, if you're also looking to join as a project manager or an analyst, something that doesn't require direct coding, this is also a great session for you. After Irene, in the second part of the session, because all of our sessions going forward are split into 2, we have a CBS alum who will be joining us, but I will talk more about him after Irene's session. Quick things to note. If you're on camera, make sure that your camera is, your room is well lit. Just some basic etiquette, make sure that you're paying attention, you're not necessarily speaking to someone on camera. I understand that sometimes people come to the room, so just turn off your camera if need be. Please remember to keep yourself on mute at all times unless you do have a question to ask. This is pretty much an interactive session once Irene finishes her presentation. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or of course you can raise your hand. And finally, There is an assignment due today after today's session. I know a lot of you are still working on your LAMP list from Tom's session last week, but fear not, this assignment builds into that assignment. So take notes, ask Irene a lot of questions that can help you with your assignment. And with that, Irene, I am going to hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. And we have until 7:30?
That's right.
Is that right? Great. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm happy to hear that you met Tom last week. I actually was, we work in the same office. So we were actually sitting side by side. So yeah, but our work definitely builds off of each other. I'm going to present some stuff. I'm not going to stop to answer like questions, and I'm not going to be paying attention to the chats, but we'll have time later on. So just know that too. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just going to be like looking at the slide. So I'm going to share some stuff right now. Hopefully that'll, actually give me 1 second. I need to make it, maximize it. Okay. Do you see the landscape of tech?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Okay. And then as you see, landscape of tech, ad tech, marketing, science, careers, where can I fit? And again, these are different terms, but they actually kind of all roll into each other, and we'll get into that. Some of these might be new to you, so that's fine. So again, just intro. Hi. Me, I've done lots of stuff, like lots of careers. A lot of it has had data as part of it. I started out doing market research at a company called Procter & Gamble. So they make like Pantene, Olay. They used to own Pringles and Jif, and then they sold that off. So just they used to make a ton of consumer products. Some brand strategy agencies. I did my MBA at NYU Stern. And then I did brand management. So I worked at Post, the cereal company, working on kids cereals. I worked at Unilever, working on shampoo. And then I decided to go into tech. And it was always a part of my job. But then I actually made the switch over and did some more agency work, an agency that's owned by Gary Vaynerchuk. Some people know Gary V if you follow social media. So his agency, and then I went over to Facebook, where it's really, I learned a lot about how things work in the tech space. So again, I had an entire career before, so I totally understand what it is to like be new to this space. So again, any question will be free game. And then I started, I actually did some time where I was consulting with a lot of startups in the kind of ag tech space. And the retail space. And then I also started doing some advising for the CMC. So that's the Career Management Center. And then I moved over full-time working there last Valentine's Day. So I've been there for a little bit under a year. And so the key message that I want you to come away with is actually there's many cool jobs that you will be qualified for after you do, finish the program, and they all have different titles and they're at different size companies. So you really have to dig deeper to find them. I'll say that and I don't know how it's going to be with you, but sometimes any people who are interested in tech, you hear the same companies, and then it makes you get really narrow, and that's not real, right? Like there's so many companies or companies that you've never heard of. So say like I'm working with the students right now, and everyone's talking about Google and Apple and Amazon. And I'm like, but there's a ton of other companies. So I think just always remember that. Cause yeah, you'll, especially now that there's the changes happening, it's the same ones that are in the news cycle. There's plenty of other companies, and there's still a lot of growth happening, and it's a really exciting space. So, I'll say this too, again, is really important, is just like showing your passion, and then like any experience that you might have in a specific area of business or industry. And we'll talk about that too, because that even is as a consumer. So like I worked with a student 2 years ago, and she landed at TikTok, and a big part of it, honestly, was that she's what we'd call like a super user. She knew the platform so well that helped her in her interviews, right? And same thing like Facebook, I talked a lot about how I use it. And you don't necessarily think like, oh, that qualifies me, but it does, because then you're getting to know the platform as a user would know it. But now you're also going to get to understand the platform as a builder, sees it as well. So this is just some areas that I'm going to mention, because again, even within software engineering, there's different homes that a software engineer can play at a big company. And I think that's not talked enough about. So we'll talk about some of these more, but there's the advertising, media effective space, sales, operations, and finance. So like every business has these kind of areas of business within their company, and they all have different kind of software and different needs, or different data and analytics needs. So again, we'll get into that. So a few key industries to explore. So when we talk about tech, again, tech is a term that just gets thrown out all the time, but it means so many different things. So for example, right, Facebook, and I'll speak about that one because I know that one so well, but it's called a tech company, but it's actually a media company, right? Like we know this, like, and you wouldn't think of it that it's the same thing as like the New York Times, but it kind of is. It makes all of its money, or like, well, and we'll look at a slide, like the predominant way that it makes money is through advertising. So very much it's a media company, right? It's not like they're like Samsung and they're creating all these different, consumer electronics products, which is what tech used to mean, 20 years ago. There's also fintech, right? So, and this sometimes it's like when you're buying something at a small business, right? A few years ago, you would be cash only. And then little by little, they started having that the little square that they put on their cell phone for you to be able to swipe your card, right? All that fintech space has been able to make these small businesses a bigger player. And now it's a really big deal. Related to that is the e-commerce space. So some of you might know Shopify. Some of you might have friends who have their own little Shopify store. A lot of people created Shopify stores during the pandemic, right, to start their own business. Some people have Amazon businesses, right? So again, it's not, there's the people who start the business, but then there's all of the engineers who work to make these platforms exist, right? So, and this is just a funny thing, but Shopify started because the founder was into like skiing, and then created his own ski shop and saw that, like online digital, and saw that because there wasn't an existing need, and literally he created it. And then that package is what led to the creation of Shopify. And so SaaS is like software as a service. So some of you might have heard that term. That's a really important term that you should kind of get to know in this space. Basically, that's software that enables a lot of like business operations. So you might have heard of companies like Salesforce. And so Salesforce is like software that a salesperson would use. So I used to work in sales, and it helps you keep track of your clients and when you met with them and how your business is growing. But these are software that like versus Facebook is consumer focused, right? So it's like a user is using Facebook. Facebook, even like some of you might have used Messenger, right? Messenger created a messenger for companies called the Workplace. And so Workplace would fall within kind of like a SaaS, because it was meant to be business to business, right? So B2B. And that falls into this whole other SaaS space. So there's a lot of businesses in that all become, it's all about the enablement of making kind of making businesses run smoother and easier, right? So that you'll see like SAP, Workday, Salesforce are big players in that space. And we know this too, right? So some of you might have, right, subscriptions or spend time watching Netflix, Disney Plus, Spotify, right? Apple has them, like they all have them, but that is all of those things. They're media companies, but they're also tech companies, and they also have a lot of builders, right? They also have a lot of data. So that's the beauty of a lot of these tech companies, is that they have tons and tons and tons of data. So they're constantly able to improve their product, but they're also constantly able to learn more about their consumer. So that's why there's always, when a company has a lot of data, there's a lot of work that can be done. And that's why it's different, say, working at a company like, a Facebook versus when I was working on Post, the kids cereal. I had to go out and do focus groups with like 5 moms at a time, versus at Facebook, you have data of every single user, right? So anyway, that's a big difference between these. And then the D2C startups, obviously, like some of you might have even ordered from that even during the pandemic. I bought some, Dr. Bronner soap direct. So these are things, again, a lot of businesses that used to exist on, say, like an Amazon platform or a Shopify actually, have their own businesses within it. And then this is just to flesh out a little bit of what I mentioned before of, we call, again, Alphabet is the parent company of Google, right? So it's called a tech company, but when you look at it, right, it shows, it's like if you look at the deep orange, 80% of their revenue, right, like how they make money is advertising, right? So, but you wouldn't think Google's an ad company, but it is. That's where it makes most of its money. And you've probably heard, like, they make the Pixel phone. You've probably heard they bought Nest, right? They bought, that's the thermostat. But again, those are very tiny pieces of their business. And the reason that that's important is because you have to think about the teams, right? If it's only making, like this, they show all those things are 1% of their business, they're not hiring a lot of people for those businesses. So that's why it's helpful for you to know where they make their money, right? So for example, I talk to students a lot about this, but it's like, if you start to understand the media space, the advertising space, how that works, it sets you up for a lot of other jobs within these media companies. Because again, when you're looking at, say, again, Facebook, for example, you're using it as a consumer, but when you get an ad, right, when you see those ads, that is an entire team that facilitated that. So when someone creates a product on Facebook, a lot of times it's an advertising product, right? So maybe 7 years ago, them making a video ad was a big deal, because before, and we forget this, before it used to be just a post, a photo, right? So again, a product at a company that's like Facebook or Google, it's an ad product. So even YouTube, right? A lot of the innovation is around ads, right? So again, I think it's a really, a part that's not talked about in the tech industry that's really important, because again, it just fuels a lot of money. A lot of the business that exists is from ads. I think this too, even Netflix, for example, which you mentioned, we know it's creating a cheaper service that's going to facilitate ads, right? So again, they're changing their entire business model because there's so much money with advertising. And then, so if you look over to the other side, right, there's Facebook revenue, and this is old numbers, but I don't think it's changed that much. For example, how much they're spending a lot on the metaverse. They're not making anything off of it, right? So you have to think about, where are they hiring, right? So their revenue, 97% of it is still coming from ads. Okay. Okay. And so this is, and MarTech, again, I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's a weird word, but it's basically like marketing, like tech-enabled marketing companies. And a lot of them help to deliver ads or measure ads. It's still related. It plays within the ad world, but these are companies that you might not necessarily have heard of, but they play a specific role within facilitating ads. So, and so, yeah, I would assume people haven't heard necessarily of AppNexus, so don't worry about them. But again, those are companies that are always hiring because they're allowing these ads to happen on these interfaces. So this is just something that you'll come back to. You'll get to know what these companies are and what roles that they play. So you see, like, again, on the left, it's advertising and promotion related companies. Then we have commerce and sales, we have content and experience. And then data is a huge, huge piece. This is something that you might learn. I'm not sure if you learn it in your program, but say there's Tableau. Tableau is something that we talk about a lot. Tableau is a software that allows you to visually present data, and it's used by a lot of companies. So again, you don't think about it, but it's like there's a team that works at Tableau that is creating that software and making it easier to make really nice, charts and graphs. And a ton of businesses are using it, for example. So then I'll move on because this is just, again, this is probably new. Okay. And then this is, again, the space within the marketing world. This is just to help you understand too, again, like because there's so much money involved, there's all these teams to make sure that stuff happens. So like, for example, if you look at the top left, there's agencies. So those are ad agencies. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I think maybe people might understand where it's like when we talk about Facebook ads, or even actually, no, step back, right? You know, Super Bowl, right? The Super Bowl ads, I think people know this, right? They're made by agencies, right? They're made by big teams of people. So even if it's an ad for, say when there was what was the popular ad a few years ago that was like the oat milk, right? With the CEO, he didn't make the ad, right? It was a creative team that made the ad. But the thing is the company who manufactures a product pays the money to the ad agency team to make it. And the ad agency team, just like they did that $1 million Super Bowl ad, they're like, well, I want that to go on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Google. I want it to go on all those like annoying things that follow you, right? That's all tech companies that create that software then it's like, I was looking at some shoes and now the shoes are following me, right? At all the websites, all that is enabled by this ecosystem. And then this is just, again, more, this is showing more kind of what you traditionally think of when we talk about media companies. Because again, you said Facebook and Google aren't, but these are all real media companies and they all have digital tech components to it. So one of my classmates, she actually leads like a product team at the New York Times, because you forget how now media, a lot of it, like no one's reading it on the paper, right? They're reading it online or they're reading it on their phone. So very much so there's like a digital component to these companies. And then this is just when I talk about agencies, and just so everyone knows too, the reason I'm mentioning this a lot is because these are lesser known companies that always need help, right? That are not the obvious, like Facebook, Google, et cetera. So there's advertising agencies and there's media agencies. And again, the big companies hire them to make the ads, but then to also decide what ad goes where and how much money to spend and how to track it. You might have heard of terms that are called like, or you might not have, maybe you didn't realize it, but it's like when you see an ad multiple times, there's something called retargeting, right? Where there's ways that you can set it up, like on the tech side, that it knows when someone has been served something. So then it'll serve it up to them. It knows when someone went to the website and took one step closer to checkout, but didn't. So then it'll retarget them, right? So there's all these really smart things that you can do because of tech, because of like having things tracked. So this is just, again, this is for anyone who actually is interested in learning more about this space. These are some key players. And this is another interesting space that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about. You might have heard of Nielsen when they talk about ratings, right? They talk about new shows and how it did on Nielsen. Nielsen is actually just also a huge data company because of their access to like so much information with people. They don't just do ratings, they also do like purchases. They track all sorts of information from when you know, like there's the scan codes when you buy like, you know, a can of soup, right? That is all data, right? So a company like this tracks that data. So I worked with a student who like, he got a PM role at Nielsen, right? When again, that was something that wasn't, no one ever talked about Nielsen or Kantar or Gartner. And I don't know if people know, like, so I don't know if anyone knows Scott Galloway. He talks like a lot about marketing and stuff. He's also like in the kind of the Gary Vee space, but he sold his company to Gartner because he kind of created, like, again, there's a lot of hunger by companies to know what's going on in this space. And even though they hire their own teams, a lot of times they're still hiring these companies that are the data experts. So, and then this too, even in the world that I used to work in, of like Procter & Gamble and the Unilevers, there's still tech focus there. A lot of them are trying to play in this space. I actually was just talking to someone who he works at Walmart, and Walmart has a whole team that's like called Walmart Connect, right? When it's all digitally focused. And he was just telling me that they have this other arm that's called Store Number 8. That's all like innovation, like new to the world stuff. So again, you have these big companies that everyone's trying to play and to learn like what's the future of data and technology, and they don't want to be left behind, and they have enough resources. So a lot of them are hiring their own things. I will say, even related to this, so say, for example, I mentioned fintech, right? So a lot of people talk about Stripe. A lot of people talk about Square, which was it's co-founded by the Twitter co-founder. Also, like, he did Twitter, but then he also did Square. So people talk about these same companies, but Visa, MasterCard, American Express are all doing cool things in the tech space, right? So it's just, these big companies are there. They're just, it might not be as sexy, so no one talks about it. Okay. And then, and these are just, again, when I talk about like consumer brands, these one, like I mentioned, the Walmart, the Targets, all of like, even any retail, they all have, Target.com, and they all have teams of builders, of engineers and analysts, et cetera, because they've been playing a lot in the e-commerce space. We know this too, even with automotive, their focus on tech is more in the autonomous vehicle space. So basically, it's just, tech has transformed so many industries. So you'd be surprised who's hiring, right, for software engineers, but it goes like across a lot of industries. Okay. And then this, I wanted everyone to just humor me, and we're going to go through an exercise. So I think people are right. You're in front, like, people have, you can ignore me, but we're going to do a little exercise for 3 minutes, where I want you to kind of just see what's out there. But so to explore different roles, look at the qualifications, just to get an idea of what exists out there. But poke around, like, there's roles within sales, with operations, measurement, ads research, insight, strategy. These are all different kind of areas. And sometimes, and it'll say that they're looking for analysts, or sometimes they're having software engineers, or sometimes they're looking for research. All those things are still getting skill sets that apply that apply to. So I want everyone, and you can, like, go on, well, you're on mute, but, keep your video on, do whatever, but just go to metacareers.com, and we're going to take that break for 3 minutes. And I want you to just see what's there, what's interesting. And then I'll ask for participation of just like, what's kind of a cool thing that you didn't know, but pay attention to different roles and just look for things that kind of talk on either engineering or data analytics. And I'm going to do the same thing. Is that clear? Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay. So, and I'll see, what time is it? Yeah. So we'll stop at 7. Okay. Hi, everyone. Did anyone see anything interesting in terms of specific roles or areas that you didn't think to look at? Okay. Oh, and you can speak, please. You don't need to type that. Like, you can just popcorn. But we see, okay. So Talisa, internal
Yes.
community relations.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I sorry, I haven't been feeling well. So yeah, I thought that this was really interesting. I did go down a couple other rabbit holes that I thought were super cool. I actually like the way that they have this set up. Like you can hear from people who have the job. They tell you what they're looking for. They tell you the qualifications. Yeah, I really like it. And really, I work in communications right now and do a lot with internal communications. So I think it's cool. Yeah, I liked it.
Cool. And see, with your background in communications too, again, you might look at roles within communications, look at roles within advertising. So I think that's great. Anyone else?
I noticed there was like a lot of scientific jobs, careers, titles, and I was just like, oh, whoa, okay.
Which were you looking at?
I mean, a couple different ones. I didn't stay on one too long. I had 3 minutes, so I was trying to check out everything really fast.
Sure.
But I guess I didn't, it's not that I didn't understand that like science and technology can go together. I just didn't realize that like these types of roles were just out there. It was a bit overwhelming.
And that makes sense. Sometimes too, you get into an area like I know sometimes they hire a lot of researchers, for example, right? Because they have a lot of money and they're trying to get like they're even hiring like PhDs. And so yeah, there is a lot of science. But then I think that too, if you see that it's something that's not necessarily relevant, just move on, right? Like because I know I wrote down where there was like software engineering, and then there's also enterprise engineering. And even I was like, what is the difference? I didn't know. Right. And then I saw enterprise engineering specifically for internal tools, right? For people at the company to use. So for example, right, where it's like, that's something that I never even knew existed. Sorry, Michaela, were you going to say something?
No, I agree with Amanda. It's just like a lot, but so some of it was pretty interesting. Like I never even thought about like the glove, like they have one specifically for an artificial intelligent glove.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw they had one that was also specifically for like software engineering, and it was for Salesforce, right? So not only is it for Facebook, but it's like because they know they want someone who has experience with Salesforce, right? So you're right, it can be that specific, but then also it can be more general. I think it super varies. Anyone else?
Yeah, one thing I noticed is most of these job postings require you to have quite a bit of experience in the field.
Yep. No, you're right. I think they have like 2 or 3 years of having done something. I think that's fair.
Minimum, yeah.
Yep. No, I think that's really helpful. Am I echoing?
That's always my like my kryptonite though, you know what I mean? Like who has the experience coming out of a boot camp like that? Like nobody.
Right. And I think you're right. That's why, but again, Facebook is a company that you wouldn't necessarily go to directly, right? That's a company where they're hiring people who've already done this somewhere else. It's really just to show you of like, this is where like a career path can lead. But absolutely, like I'm working with students who want to go there now. And I'm like, that's like not, we talk about like, what's a stepping stone to get you closer to that. Right. So say, for example, if you know you like the social media space, you might work at a smaller company and then learn that space. And then you work your way up. You're right. How do you get 2 to 3 years experience? But that's something that a Facebook or Google is hiring at that level. And that makes sense, right? Because they can. But this is really just to show you of like, this is the breadth of all the different roles. I also wrote down, even within sales and marketing, they need engineering and analytics. And there's also a data and analytics team. There's design and user experience, right? So some of you might see that you're like, I really care about the aesthetics of what I built, right? And then you'll see that you actually are really, really like driven to go more towards the design side. So there's just really to let you know, like you're going to get the essential skills, but you will start to see what you're really passionate about. Anything else before because we're going to do this exercise with one other company. Anything else? Okay. So then I'll go back to, sorry, give me 1 second to share. Okay, and then so now I want you to go, we're gonna do the same exercise at WPP. So WPP is like one of those mega conglomerate agencies that own a ton of other agencies. So this is just to show you a different side of it. And these don't have the same requirements, right? So this isn't a tech company like the other one is a tech born company. So yeah, you can copy paste that and search that, and then we'll go until 7:10. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Did anyone find anything interesting in these?
Nothing in particular, but I did notice that there was a lot of international jobs.
Yes. Definitely. Because this is a very global firm. Did anyone look at like engineering or data roles?
Yeah, I saw some like web analyst and traffic manager. Thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And you're right, you see, and this is a separate thing, but you see it was a lot harder to search on this one than it was on the other one, right? And hopefully too, as you're learning to like code, they and this will come up separately, but a lot of times people talk about product sense as being something that's really important. So you're showing that, right? Where you're also paying attention. You're like, this wasn't kind of not that intuitive. And you're right. Like first you had to be like, wait, let me just narrow it down to the US, when sometimes it's obvious, right? And sometimes a search will assume that you're in the US. And then so I think you probably noticed that as well. It was a rougher search. And it is helpful when you're gonna have to know what key terms to start looking for, right? So say that's why it is helpful to look at, say, like a Facebook type company or a more tech company, to learn what roles they have, because then you know what to search for other roles, right? So say infrastructure was something that was a specific role on Facebook, and that's something that, again, you'll learn what those keywords are to look for when something has a really bad site, but that has a lot of opportunity. So again, like I'll work with students too who they might be looking for engineering, but they also might be looking for like data science, or they might be looking for analysts. So there's words like data, intelligence, insight. All those things are separate words for just like, again, right, like being able to make meaning out of information. So you'll have to almost kind of like, you'll learn as you go, but that's why it's like pay attention to the tech companies. I think you're gonna have to start, like you should start hopefully reading up on the space, because then again, you'll hear these same things coming up again and again. So I even saw something that specifically talked about like Web3, right? Someone mentioned that there's like a specific about like the glove. You'll start to hear like even now, right? Everything's about like AI. If you're on LinkedIn, everything's talking about AI. A year ago, everything was about NFT. But it's like, know what it is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like study it, but you at least know, because you'll see like, okay, some companies will start looking for like hiring for that just to explore, but that's not where they make money, right? It still goes back to what we were talking about. They're still making money off of ads, they're making money off of e-commerce, they're making money off of that. But then you'll see they're hiring to play with other areas. So say, for example, I think if you're keeping up with the news, right? Like there was a lot of layoffs at Amazon, for example, right? And Amazon's a huge company. So the layoffs are really kind of a drop in the bucket, but the layoffs, a lot of them were happening in their kind of their hardware space, right? So you'd say it's more of like the Echoes, right? And it makes sense. You're like, they're not making money off of selling a $30 Echo. They're making money off of when everyone's buying Amazon products, right? The shipping. So I think just pay attention, like it makes sense also like that's where there were layoffs, because it's like the company's investing in that just to kind of see how it goes, right? Some of you might have seen if you're in the city, there was like Amazon to go stores, right? There used to be an Amazon real life bookstore. Those things did not pan out, right? So I think it's just helpful to know like what's going on in the space. Anything else? I see we've had a few things put in the but yes, yeah, and Chrissy, right? So like more early career roles, and you're right. So agency in general is more open to starting out earlier in your career, because agency, again, it doesn't have the same kind of perks as working at a tech job. They want people who want to learn, and a lot of agency is like it's very common that someone starts at an agency, say like straight out of college or as an intern, and then you kind of like work your way up because you're learning it, right? It's very much of a kind of like a shadowing model, right? So I think that is also helpful to see, like agencies are like, it's very common that someone kind of learn the ropes at agency and then they go in-house to a company. So it was also part of being program management. And then we have producer web development. Yeah. So again, there's some roles within agencies. And then I'm just going to go back to the deck, just a few, because in the interest of time, just a few takeaways, and then I'll open it up to just general questions. So go back. Okay, so then this is really important. I don't know how much time people spend on LinkedIn, but I recommend that you start spending a lot of time on LinkedIn. That's a social media that's actually good to spend time on because you learn a lot, right? And that's where the beauty of the algorithm then starts doing the work for you. So for example, right, I used to work in marketing and I used to have like a lot of alerts set up for marketing. And then now, as a lot of marketing roles became digital marketing, I was getting roles that were more digital marketing, social media marketing, whatever. And now I'm getting product marketing roles because that's just naturally what my space has kind of evolved to include. Right. And I even saw, I was like, oh, wow, I never even set that up. It's just because it had that same history. It built in that knowledge of what I've been searching on for the past few years, right? It knows my network. It knows what I'm spending time on and it sees who I'm following. So it just gets smarter. So you'll see, like, it's like time spent on LinkedIn is time well spent. Start paying attention to companies that you care about. Start, like, even someone mentioned before that at Facebook, it also mentioned, it showed people's names and showed, you can look some of those people up and see where did they work before they worked at Facebook, right? Like, because I think that's the thing, everyone thinks like that's where they are. That's not where they started. So I think it's really helpful to see other people's paths, because then that also inspires where you might want to where you might want to start. So, and then on LinkedIn, you can set up specific alerts of like, let me know, like when I wanted to make the move to higher ed, right? I was setting up alerts for Columbia and NYU, right? Like, because I was like, I know that's the space that I want to be in. So you can do very specific things. And I recommend you follow people that you like learning from, right? Because that's also, you'll, when you do start interviewing, having, again, knowledge and passion for this space, someone who's interested in technology is just like, usually you're fascinated by what's going on and what's going on, right? Like I can still talk smartly enough about what's going on in the AI space and the chat GPT and how people are using it, and what the implications are, just because I'm in the space, right? Like you have to kind of show that you really do want to kind of know it and you've invested time in getting to know it. It's not just, I know this company, I want this job. It's like, I like this area. This is where I'm going to have my career. It becomes kind of like a lifestyle when you're working within the tech space. And the other tip, again, with Tom's, the 2-hour job search is going to be important. But again, I know it's like, you're probably really new in this space of just like, you don't know how many companies, like I know I talk with some students and they're like, I have a list of 100 people, like 100 companies. And it's like, they had to really know the space to list out that many companies that they would be interested in. So again, like, I think that's something that you should revisit too. Cause then you'll see, you're like, oh, I know why I like this company, right? I know what Shopify does. I know what they're like, where they're growing. I know where they're shrinking. I know, like they just announced that they're doing something that better enables like Facebook and Google, for example, right? Like knowing a lot about the company that you're interested in goes far. And then once you know about that company, guess what? You can apply to all their competitors. So now you just did the homework, right? So you might as well, like if you're like applying to Shopify, you'd also apply to like, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, or like all the other e-commerces and these might not mean anything to you now, but when you get into that space, again, like I said, if you get into fintech, if you get into, some of you might really be into health tech, right? So it's hopefully you start to pay attention to even, again, any apps that you use, think about it where it's like, someone's building this, right? Like when you call an Uber, right? Someone's building that. When I'm looking at my documents, I was talking to a student, he worked at Epic, and Epic, if you've ever looked at your like medical records online, it'll say like if it's a mountain or it's powered by Epic. So I told him, I was like, that's so cool. And he's like, right. And you don't think about it because it's behind the scenes. You don't think about health tech companies or even fintech. No one cared about, except now it's like a sexier thing, but no one ever paid attention to how they pay for something digitally, right? No one cared about PayPal or Venmo, except when it became kind of like a cooler, sexier thing. And then this again, which we mentioned before, you can't like, don't all go for the same roles. There's still a lot of other things out there. And then, and I'll just wrap up, like I'll end here, and then just open it up for any questions that you all have. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, thanks for coming. I didn't mean to cut anybody off if I just did. But I had a question about the Gary V, working with Gary V. How was that different from working with like Procter and Gamble? Was the culture like noticeably different, and did it make a difference in the way you did your job there? Yeah,
I think again, so, and this is so Gary V now plays in a lot of spaces, right? So he has Vayner RC, Vayner X. He has an agency inspired by his dad, Sasha, all that. He started out with his agency called Vayner Media. And when he started it, it was very much so. He's like, this is a social media agency. He's like, I'm not touching anything else.
Yeah.
We are, this is our little hole and we're going to do it really, really well. And then he was smart because then he kind of owned that space and now he's like everywhere. But I think the thing is very much with an agency is, I worked with and I was already older. I was in my 30s when I was there and everybody else around me was like super, super just young and hungry. So I think very much that's his model. I think that's very much of tech where they're like, if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and learn, then we'll give you a shot. And that's the kind of environments that are like, again, and that's great for those who are starting out. But me, when I was already in my 30s, I'm like, this is crazy. Like it was crazy. It was really weird.
Yeah.
But again, I was like, oh, if I was young, I'd be like, loving it, but yeah, it's a very different culture where, but people also were getting paid less because he's like, I want people who are just hungry and happy to be here. I met someone who a lot of people started working for him for free just to get their foot in the door. So I think he's very much of like that mentality. But I think it's like, yeah, again, the laws have changed about unpaid internships, but I think his whole thing is just about like opportunity can be anywhere, but good ideas can be anywhere. And I think that's very much kind of like the culture. And I think that's why, but again, big companies hire him because they know they have so much, their culture is very kind of stiff and rigid and it's hard to change. So that's why companies hire agencies, right? So Procter and Gamble works with a company called IDEO a lot. So I don't know if you've ever heard of IDEO, but if anyone's interested in like design thinking or any sort of like innovation type stuff, IDEO is like kind of like created that whole space. And so Procter and Gamble would hire IDEO to help come up with new products because they know internally, and they say the term is you become a proctoid, right? You become kind of like the same thing. The good thing is that you've all gone through the same training and you're able to like, they're very much a promote from within company. So they know that if you've gotten like again, the CEOs have all come from working 20, 25 years at P&G, but they need creative minds outside, right? So a lot of these big companies, they have the resources but they don't have the culture that they've been able to have. That like, how do you create a well-oiled machine, but then also people who can just like zig and zag? It doesn't fit, right? So I think culture is really important and really different. And again, you get a sense for that from all the different touch points that a company has, right? Especially now on LinkedIn, you can follow the founders of these companies and get a sense of what they're like, right? Elon Musk, I'd be like, you see that where he's like, he thinks that it's okay to have to sleep at the job. Like it's just different cultures, and they're not hiding it right anymore. Back in the day, you never knew who was the CEO. What does he think? How did, what are his values? But now you know that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. And this was really just to inspire you to see that there's a lot out there. And it's not meant to overwhelm. It's also meant to see those, like, you're right, there's like almost like a time and place for your career. And you'll see where it's like, where do you start? And then again, people nowadays move after a year. They got what they wanted. They learned a lot, and then they learned about a new opportunity. But doing your research is going to be really important, because then you won't even know about those opportunities.
Go ahead, Valerie.
Let me lower my hand before I forget. So I like a tricky question to ask, because there's like so many hopeful students here. But how do you like break the barrier of being the entry level person? Like, where do you go? Because it is like a really wide range of jobs, and there's a lot of them out there, but it's like there's a secret knock. Like, what do we do?
Right. I think that's a good question. Like, I think and it's funny because even when I mentioned, I was talking to an old colleague who was talking about this thing that he's doing at Walmart, the cool incubator. And I was like, how did you know what I mean? And it was just a thing where somehow he applied, but honestly, it was posted on LinkedIn. So I will say, I think sometimes you think that these things are unheard of and no one knew. It was posted on LinkedIn. It really was. And there are, like, even internship wise, right? Like there are things that you're able to start first and that are meant to, temp to perm. But I do think you'd be surprised how many things are posted on LinkedIn that you never thought, that you think like it's only big companies. It's not.
I think like where I struggle with that though is like we get, like with us being newbies and wanting to be successful in our education, it just like we get like some conflicting information. I think like networking is the primary goal, or dry applying. And it is hard. I have a LinkedIn account that I've been active on for a long time, and just see a lot of people that are out there kind of in the same boat. It's kind of, I don't know, sometimes it's like a pick me, like they're like literally raising their hand waiting for someone to pay attention to them.
Right.
It's scary when you're going to school and you're trying to speak things into existence, I guess. Like you don't even know where to start.
No, I get it. Yeah. What is it? The whole manifesting thing is very popular now. Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm a different generation. No, but I think you're right. And again, the students I work with too, they're like, what, I don't understand networking, or what is this like coffee chat? What is it? They're just kind of like, they just want to be like, I want a job. Do you have a job? But I think that's the thing where it's like networking, it really is a thing of it's just, you don't know where a conversation will lead, because sometimes it's timing, right? So it's like, do they need help? Oh, you have help to offer. That's honestly how it works sometimes. But I think you like, and hopefully that's something that you'll get more comfortable with. Because again, you are your own network with your cohort. Everyone that speaks to you is becoming part of your network. Any activities that you go to outside of your like this education, right? Like you'll start to see there's all sorts of things. And again, where are people based? Are you all like?
I'm near Houston, so I had been there. We have
because even too, like a lot of like your places, there'll be like even New York, right? There's a lot of small business initiatives, right? So you'll start to learn kind of like all these things are different networking things, but a big part of networking is knowing what you have to offer, And I think that's the thing that you're going to have to be able to learn. So when you do meet people, right, like you're meeting to someone who, you know, is near you, who's starting a new business, who needs help building a website, like, do you have the skill sets that they need? Do you know enough about the space to have that conversation? But you're right, like, networking is constant. And like someone wrote, like, it's marketing yourself. It is absolutely, like, I'm a professional marketer. That's all I do all the time, is I'm thinking, like, how do I summarize what I'm about, what I'm interested in? How do I, like, can I do homework and know what this person needs? Right? Because also you want to be smart. It isn't just like, you know, throwing pasta at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's not. It's you're starting to see, like, even again, locally, right? If you wanted to do something that's more local, what businesses are popping up, what's growing, what sector, a lot of the areas that people live, right? Tech is growing, right? There's a lot of businesses that are growing. So when you see that a business is growing, paying more attention to that company, because there are going to be opportunities there. I see too, sometimes people, they're hiring for sales at some companies, and you're like, all right, they're growing there, they're going to be growing in the other spaces. So, but it is putting in the work before you and again, you're still in the beginning. Like, how much more left do you have in the program? Because that's why it's like, you start this now so that you're still, you know, getting more educated and again, educated on the space. I don't mean literally like your coding. I mean the other part of the work.
Yeah, it's just like overall, even like a lot of, you'll find very few jobs that say entry level. And I know everybody says this, and I believe it. It's just a lot of people say apply for jobs that you are not qualified for. This came up at it was a couple days ago. We had a recruiter speak to us, and she was like, education's not important anymore. I don't care what job you look for. They want a computer. That's what they say. We want computer science degree. So I guess it's just like confusing for us. Like, you guys.
No, but a boot camp is your education. Again, I hear what you're saying, but I think that was old school. Like, people know that boot camps are definitely.
Oh no,
yeah.
I can tell you firsthand, I had a technical interview recently, and I was only able to do it because of what I learned here. I would have been lost in la la land. I did not know what they were asking me, and I got it to work.
Right. Great. Right. But you're not even done with the program. So imagine again, if you were to have that interview after you were fully prepared for it. Right.
Oh, yeah, I could. I mean, I don't think that I was ready. I'm ready to be employed, maybe towards the end, but it was just a point that I was able to actually do it.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I didn't know what I was looking at. But it's just looking at all those jobs, and they're like, well, we want this. And I guess we kind of like blindly applying, hoping that they're going to disregard the fact that we don't have what they say they want.
But again, I think that's why it's like there's experience of what you're learning in the program, but then there's also, again, if you've been using something before, there's other, and again, that's where the marketing comes in, where you're right. You wouldn't say, I just did this program, I just finished, hire me, right? It's like that plus.
I couldn't imagine trying to channel something that I did 3 years ago in my like freshman year.
Oh, you have it's funny because I'll look at and again, spend time on LinkedIn. I'll see people who are 18 and then they have like a LinkedIn longer than me, and I'm like, what is this? And it's just a bunch of internships. So so every experience is super relevant. Again, P&G that I mentioned, that was my first job out of undergrad, and I still use some of the stuff that I learned there. Right? That set everything up. Is like I worked on skincare. I worked, like, I learned a lot of really valuable stuff at that company. So do not don't think that it's, oh, in the past it doesn't matter. You're still building on it. It's super valuable.
Okay.
This has been a great conversation, both of you. And Valerie, you and I just spoke, and these are definitely things that are on everyone's mind. Irene, I know you've had a very long day, but there are two more people who have had their hands raised for a while. Do you have?
Oh, sorry. I see Darian.
Yes. So Manuela, I know you had your hand raised first, so please go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this talk. I have one question, is that we learned in class that a tech job usually should last about 2 years and you should keep moving up. How do you honestly talk to somebody who tells you, why are you coming to my company? And still have that thought in the back of your mind, I'm only going to be here for 2 years tops.
Oh, well, and I think it's funny. I talked to a student today who she's like, I'm just going to be there 2 years. And it's like, you don't, I think you still want to do as well as you can in any role.
Yeah.
And in the back of your head, you can think, what do I want to make sure I get out of this experience?
Mm.
Right. So that's you cannot have that in the front of your mind, because it will affect how you perform. It'll affect when you meet. You're also going to be like, you're going to be like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And that's not going to be helpful. I think be committed to it. But again, in the back of your mind, like most people move on. What again, like, if I knew I was really curious about UX research, right? So I knew I was doing sales oriented stuff, but I made sure to make friends with the UX research team, right? And then they invited me, I'd go to their focus groups and I'd be in the rooms when they're like making their presentations. I networked with that team. I ended up even interviewing for a UX research role, right? So I think, and you never know, like, yes, you might move on, but it might even be internally after 2 years.
Okay.
So yeah, I think just keep an open mind. And I think it's just more the thing of make sure you keep learning, because that's how your career will keep growing. And I think that's the thing. It's not necessarily, and you keep moving up. You might start out at a startup and then have the same role. And I worked at Post, and then I did the same role at Unilever, but I went from a cereal company to like a huge global company that makes food, beauty, everything, right? So it was what we call like lateral. But I moved to work at a company that gave me more opportunities, and that's completely okay. And that's still growing, right? Even though it's like, it wasn't more pay, it wasn't a different title. It was just, I made that move because I knew it was opening up more opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Darian?
I just had like a comment about what Valerie was talking about as far as not having a degree. So something that I've learned a lot from recruiters coming in is that without the degree, that means they want to see a lot from your portfolio. So continuously working on side projects and showing that you're learning new things and progressing is a really good way to trump that that stigma when it comes to looking for that entry level position.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I think, and that's very tech, where it's like, show me, don't tell me. And I think people, for some reason, everyone's always waiting for permission to like do something. But again, ideally someone who wants to be in tech and be in engineering, you're a builder. You like to see things and create stuff from nothing. Right. So again, and I talk to so many students who want to be PMs, and they're like, oh, I want to do this. I'm like, what have you built? What can you show? And then you telling me you want to be PM is nothing compared to, I mentioned the student who worked at Epic. He was a psychology major in college, right? That is not computer science. I was a psychology major, and I even asked him, he got a technical product manager role at Amazon. And I was like, how? Like, and he learned it all on his own, and he built stuff. And while he was at Epic, at a small company that is not sexy, he was able to actually help build some stuff and to show that he helped build work versus, someone else who says that they want to, or someone who worked at a bigger company and didn't get the chance to actually, touch product.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it's definitely also a quality over quantity thing. So don't feel forced to like work on so many different things that are low level. Like try to focus on maybe 2 or 3 projects and go the distance with it.
Yep, absolutely. Cool.
Great comments, great questions. Thank you so much, everyone. And Irene, thank you so much. I know this is a very long day for you. So coming in and chatting with our students is really awesome. And everyone, I have recorded this session, and Irene will be sending her deck to us as well. So you'll have the names of all those dozens and dozens of companies that Irene's slides to start your research on. So thanks again, Irene.
It was so nice to meet everyone. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.
All right. And so as we move into the second part of today, a very similar topic, but I'd say somewhat slightly different perspective. We have Alan Stein. He's a big friend of Justice Through Code. He's also a CBS alum. He's worked at pretty much any company that you can think of, right, in the space, whether it's Google, Meta, Salesforce, and had lots of learnings, lots of things that he has seen on his way in his journey. And that's what he's here to talk to us about, as well as, of course, Kadima careers. So Alan, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Archana, and thank you, JTC, for having me here. As Archana said, I'll give you a quick background on me very quickly. After undergrad, I went to Wall Street, worked on Wall Street for a bit, then worked in venture capital. Then I read the book Moneyball. I don't know if anyone read the book Moneyball, but I thought I wanted to be Billy Bean, and I networked my way into baseball. And I heard what you were talking to about Irene with, about the importance of building those relationships and networking. So I'm happy to talk about that as well. And I pivoted from venture capital into baseball. Then I realized that the pay in baseball sucked and the work-life balance sucked. So I went back to Columbia Business School. And well, it wasn't that easy. I had to take the GMATs and I had to write essays and other things like that. I went to Columbia Business School. After that, I worked at American Express for 5.5 years. I got that job through networking, and I heard people here talking about the importance of that. 24 out of my 29 jobs in my career have come either from networks I've had, but more than networks I've built. And I heard folks talk about LinkedIn here also. So I'm happy to talk about how to use that as a platform. After Amex, I wanted to work in tech for a couple of reasons. One, I thought it was pretty cool. Secondly, I hated wearing khakis and a button-down shirt to work and would rather wear jeans and a t-shirt. So I applied multiple times, got rejected from Google 5 times before finally getting into Google. After 11 rounds of interviews, worked at Google for 5.5 years. I left Google to work for a couple different startups. One was Datadog as a contractor, consultant, and another one called Andela, which is helping to bridge the divide of talent in sub-Saharan Africa to connect them to opportunities in the West. Worked there, realized that startups, they have their benefits, and I will talk about that with the tech landscape, but they are not as sexy as people think sometimes. And I decided to go back into big tech, and I went into Facebook. I was at Facebook for 1.5 years. My boss left there, went to Tableau. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Tableau or business analytics software, went to Tableau software. 2 months later, Tableau was acquired by Salesforce. So then I was part of Salesforce. I was at those two companies for 2.5 years. During that time, the George Floyd incident happened, COVID occurred. I started to rethink what was important for me and what I enjoy doing. And what I really enjoy doing is growing and developing careers. So I've hired lots of people during my time at those companies. I've led lots of people. I've managed lots of people. And I started as a side hustle, Kadima, which is helping to grow and accelerate careers of underrepresented, underestimated, underpaid talent. Help people to empower them to build the skills, build the networking, build those key aspects that get your foot in the door and then help you grow and develop your career once in there, because it's a learnable skill. And networks can be built, networks can be grown. So I started this as a side hustle, and then this business started to take off, and my frustration with corporate began to increase a little bit. And I decided to go all in on Kadima. So now I work at Kadima, where I help people grow and develop their career. So on a personal note, I live in Brooklyn, New York, with 3 kids, 2 dogs, 3 birds, and 1 incredibly supportive wife. So you might hear some of them in the background. Not my wife. She's pretty well behaved. but the dogs and the kids and the birds sometimes tend to chirp or enter the room. So hopefully I'll be okay there. That's a little bit about me. I came to speak to JTC, I believe a year ago, maybe it was a little bit longer than that, when Aiden was leading the program, and Archna reached out to me and asked if I wanted to come back and speak to this group. And I was like, yeah, tell me when, and I'll be there. So I was told to come speak about the tech landscape. I'm happy to talk about that. There's lots of tumult and upheaval there with lots of layoffs. Yesterday, Coinbase laid off 950 people. Amazon laid off 18,000 people. Salesforce laid off 8,000 people. So there's lots of upheaval in the space, but I haven't created specific slides about the tech landscape. I can speak about the big tech, the FANG companies. So not only have I worked at those companies, but I've also interviewed at a lot of the companies as well. That's weird. I don't know if you guys are seeing something on the screen. I'm getting some pop-up of mine about Zoom, but you still see me, everybody? Everyone see me? Okay, cool. And so I forgot what, so I've interviewed at a lot of these companies, so I can talk to you about the interview process. I was actually recently interviewed by Amazon last year. I wasn't even interested in it. They had reached out to me. I went through the process because I train my clients on how to get through these interviews. And I actually, after getting rejected from Amazon 22 times, I had applied 22 times before. And I only know that because in their job portal, they keep a track record of all your previous applications. I've applied there 22 times. And after 22 rejections, I finally got an offer from Amazon. This time I told them no. Because I was really happy with Kadima Careers. But I kind of went through it following the same process that I teach my clients and got an offer there. So I have some slides on networking and some other things like that. I did not prepare a lot of slides about the tech landscape, but happy to really take this conversation in any direction that you want. Even though I have worked for these tech companies, it's important to know when you look at these tech organizations, about 1/3 of the roles are what I would call like tech or engineering related. And I believe all of you can probably code and have more technical aptitude than I do. I don't know how to code. I am not very technical. I manage technical people. I worked with technical people, but I have never passed lead code exams or any hacker rank thing. I've never, like, I've interviewed 1,000 people in my career, and I've never interviewed them for technical aspects. I've had other people do that when that's been required. So I can't go into code. I can't go into any of those questions, but I can talk about the organizations. I can talk about the different cultures. I can talk about how to get into these companies. And I'm really happy to take this conversation anywhere that would be most valuable for you. So I didn't come prepared with too much. So I apologize for that. But I also want to make sure that I am like the tech lands, like I was given the goal to talk about the tech landscape. So I like that it's a very vast subject matter to discuss. I can talk about Elon, which I can talk about whatever.
Go ahead, Amanda.
So just off top, like in like the battle of diversity, and you're talking about like going up against it, not necessarily specific to women, but kind of in these companies that are not like all inclusive. And how do you go about actually like what is the actual like what are we coming up against as women coming into this field? Possibly as somebody from a different ethnicity, like what does that actually look like out there? Like how big is this actually?
Yeah, so I actually do have some, well, I won't show the slides, but I'll talk through this. These companies are all talking a big game about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're all doing a pretty crappy job of walking the talk. Right. So if you look at numbers across across the nation, I think 50 or 51% of the country are women. 13.4% of the population is Black. in America, in the States. I think everyone here is in the States, right? Yeah. 18.5% of the population is Latinx. But if you look at the representation in these tech companies, which are talking a big game, and if you want to see the big game, just go to your browser and type in equality.com. And it's a big corporation that bought that URL for a lot of money. And you can check that out. But so women represent 50% of society, but they only represent about 33% of some of the big tech players. Black people represent 13.4% of society, and they only represent about 3 to 5% of these tech companies. Amazon's higher at 33%, but a lot of that are actually the delivery folks and the warehouse folks. I still think those are actually good jobs for folks to get into, but it's not the type of diversity that you're probably thinking about. On the Latinx side, a lot of these companies have diversity of 6%. So they're talking a big game, they're not walking the talk. But these companies, at least from my understanding, like, and I battled internally, like I'm a white dude, I don't know if you've noticed that, but I have battled internally at, and I've had issues with 3 different companies where I have tried to push the envelope and say, hey, let's go down to some of the historical Black colleges and universities, or let's work with these organizations. And there's been pushback for a variety of reasons. But if you can get, and it wasn't because of blatant racism or sexism, at least in my perception. And I think I probably saw a little bit more because I was a white dude in these conversations, but I think it was more laziness, honestly, that these companies do not need to look that hard for talent. So what you need to do, unfortunately, as someone in one of these underrepresented groups, is get in front of a human. Because once you get in front of a human, at least in my experience within these walls, I have not found people to be at least consciously, outwardly racist or misogynistic or things of that nature. But what's happening is people that are not connected, people that do not know how the game is played, are just submitting their resume in. And when you submit your resume in coldly, you're competing with hundreds, if not thousands, of other people. And you're competing with people versus other individuals who are coming in through referral. And if you get a referral, and not just a generic referral, but if you get an advocate, someone that not only refers you, but will shoot a note to the hiring manager and say, hey, what's your name, Amanda? Like this woman, Amanda, I met her. She's a really sharp woman. She's really driven. I think you should at least chat with her. And if you can get Amanda to speak to a human being, then I think you have just as good of a shot as everybody else. But the challenge is Amanda's not getting that shot because you did not have that free pass into the front of the line. So that doesn't explain it all, but listening to what Irene was saying, the importance of building relationships, and my hunch is many of you do not have the network that I have because you haven't worked at some of the places that I have, but you can build those relationships. It's not easy, but there are ways to build those relationships. The fact that you're part of this program that is associated with Columbia, you can reach out to people from Columbia and say, hey, I see you're at Columbia. I happen to be through this JTC program with Columbia. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Not asking for a job. You ask someone for a job, they're going to probably ignore you. But if you just say you want a conversation and you want to seek advice, people will be more accommodating to that. So long answer, sorry, but the companies are talking a big game and they're not walking the talk.
No,
Sorry, does that answer your question, Amanda?
Yeah, that actually answered all 3 of the questions that I had written down. So all in one. Perfect.
I'm also good with ESP.
Oh, okay.
I should put that, I got to put that on my LinkedIn profile, actually. I have a certification in ESP. Actually, on my LinkedIn profile, the only certification I do have is in computer science. I took it like through Stanford while I was at Google because I think required everybody in my group to do it. And I know nothing about CS. I'm sure everybody here can blow me out of the water with scripts and SQL and Python and all that other stuff.
I know everyone, Alan's talking about all the things he doesn't know, but he is a veritable knowledge pool of many, many things. So Brian, go ahead. You had your hand raised.
Yeah, so my question kind of touches on something that you said right at the end of your last answer. So like obviously a lot of us, many of us, most of us, whatever, we don't have very large networks at this point, right?
Mhm.
And I think like I can only speak for me, but maybe other people feel the same. Like I think one of the things that's like kind of daunting for me in the idea of building the network is like, how do you not make it seem super like fake to people and like artificial? Like you're just asking for a handout. And like, how do you go, how like, what are maybe some like strategies to, I guess, make it like not so exhausting to like build up this network? Like, do I have to feel like I gotta go find 500 people and then like maintain relationships with 500 people that may or may not ever directly benefit me, you know, in a job search or career or anything? Like, so like I guess what are maybe some things that you could expand on for like going about that process
Yeah.
and like making it seem sincere?
Cool. Can I show some slides, Archana? Okay. So let me show some slides. Let me share my screen quickly because I just did a presentation about this. And by the way, if you follow me, reach out. I always do these master classes. They're totally free. My next one is in a week or so. But you can always join those. Can you see my screen here where you see like a LinkedIn profile with this guy Chintan on the screen? Okay. So this was something that, this is what you do. What you do here is you look for commonalities with people. So Brian, you asked that. Did you go to undergrad school somewhere?
I have an associate's degree through Rio Salado, yes.
Okay. Or like, what would you think is your biggest network? Have you worked at a place before that has a big alumni network, or like, are you associated with Columbia Business School through Justice Through Code?
Yeah, I would say at this point, yeah, like Columbia is probably my largest like potential source of network connections.
Okay, that one's kind of too easy because that one has a big ass network. But
Right.
let's pretend that you don't have that. So I went to like a small school upstate New York, Binghamton. I don't know if people have heard of that. But what you do is everyone should be on LinkedIn, first of all. If you're not on
Right.
LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. And if you ever need like a session on LinkedIn, I'm happy to do that as well. And then when you're in LinkedIn, you go to my network. You click on my network and you get to here. Then you go to your connections. Then you go to search with filters. And within the filters, this is an extremely powerful tool. You go to all filters. And I don't know, like, if you can spell the name of that school that you went to, or anything like a company you worked at before, even if it's like McDonald's or something, or whatever. I could put Columbia in there, but that's going to be too easy. What was the name of that school that you went to?
Rio Salado, RIO space SALADO.
RIO SA. Is that it? Rio Salado College?
Yeah.
Okay. So you look at Rio Salado College.
A little bit, Alan, maybe another 20-25%. Yeah.
Is that better for folks? Okay.
Yes.
So you have Rio Salado College. And then name a company that you're interested in. That you would like to work at.
Oh, Square.
Okay. So I think it's called Block now, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think Block is the parent company. I don't know.
Yeah. It's called Block. Now it's like the new age. So they have to go from 2D to 3D. So now they're Block. You click on show results. So there's no one there in your first degree connection. You go to your second and third degree connection. There's still no one there. So that's actually a tough example.
Terrible example.
So just because of the sake of time, let's go with my example here. And it will be tougher for you. So you got to figure out some other ways, and it could be Columbia, it could be other people that you know. But what I did here, and this is actually going to be so I wanted to find somebody at Apple. So what I did is I did a search for people, connections, Apple, that went to my university undergrad, Binghamton, which is a smaller school than Columbia, not that great of a network. And I found a bunch of people, including this guy, Chinton. And what I did is I sent him this note. And what was what was good about this note, what I highlighted, is I used his first name. So I don't know if anybody has read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If not, great book in terms of networking. And he says that the sweetest word that anybody can hear is their name. So when you hear your name, Brian, like whether you consciously or subconsciously light up, you will be more responsive to that. And then you use some commonality. So I said Binghamton, and I did something whimsical, like Go Bearcats. That was our team name, even though we don't have a lot of, like, our team sucks. And the beauty of LinkedIn is they limit your characters to 300. So you can't go on and on. You have to be short. And I wrote this to him. And what I did, this was just an example, but when I was trying to network, I would copy and paste everything here except Chinton. And then I would go back to these others, and I'd reach out to Jonathan, and I'd reach out to Zachary, and I'd reach out to Paul. And I would send the same message to 30 people, or until LinkedIn would block me from doing that. And about 30 to 50% would respond. And if you notice what I was asking for, I was not asking for a job. I was just asking for a connection. So it's like if you hit on somebody at a bar, you're not going to ask them to go home with you right away. You're not going to ask them to marry you. You got to warm them up a little bit. So I did this with 10, like I didn't do it in this case, but when I used to do it, I would do it to 10 to 30 people. And the people that respond to you, then the next thing that you do once they accept your connection, and the way you do that on LinkedIn, when you try to connect with someone, I'll connect with you right now, Brian, if I can find you on LinkedIn. Are you through Justice?
I think we're already connected.
Oh, okay. So, okay, we're already connected.
I creeped you out earlier this afternoon.
Okay, cool. So let's just say, let me just find somebody here so I can show you how to connect with someone properly. This woman's always showing up in my feed for some reason. Let's see who's looking at my profile quickly. Sorry, it's a little slow. Okay, so let's see this woman, Alyssa. So I'm not connected with her. If I want to connect with her, you can click connect, and you can either send right away, but I almost always advise to add a note. And when you add the note, again, it limits you to 300 characters. And your intent here is not to get a job. Your intent is for Alyssa to respond to you. So you send something like she went to, like, it looks like she went to Columbia Business School, or actually, I don't know, it looks like she went to Columbia Business School. So I might be like, hey, I went to CBS, I graduated, blah, blah, blah. I'd love to connect with you here on LinkedIn. And you do that with enough people, and only 30 to 50% will respond. But those people that respond to you will be there. It's selection bias. They're going to be more likely to be helpful to you. And then once they respond to you, and you'd be like, thanks so much for connecting with me. I see that you work at PAMO Law Tech. It's a company I'm interested in. Would you ever be, I'd love to get some advice. Would you ever be up for chatting sometime in the next couple of weeks? And you send that. So if you send 30, maybe 15 people respond, and then you send it out to 15 and maybe 5 people respond. And then you try to have a conversation with them and an informational interview where you are seeking advice. You are seeking guidance from them. So you got to warm them up, and you also have to be cool with rejection. So a lot of people will reject you, and it will amaze you who will say yes to you. So I reached out to one of my personal idols. Where is it? Right here. I don't know if anyone's heard of Adam Grant. He's a big organizational psychologist. This guy has 5 million followers. I reached out to him. He didn't respond the first time. I bumped it. I said some, oh, here, like the second message, thanks for accepting my connection. We talked back and forth. And eventually he actually wound up giving me feedback on my business model for Kadima. Like I have notes, like, so I never got to meet with him. I wanted like face-to-face time. He didn't have time for that, but he gave me some feedback. So it's amazing the power of reaching out. People want to give advice. So if you seek advice, like I'm here in my evening because Archana said, hey, I would love for you to give some advice to these folks in JTC. I was like, sure, I'd love to. So there are a lot of people that will do that. So long-winded answer, but you got to warm people up and you got to be okay with rejection. And the people that reject you, screw them. They're not going to be that helpful anyway. So they're saving you time.
Awesome. Thank you. That was exactly kind of what I was looking for.
Yeah. And you got to keep persevering. The job search is like, I call it job acquisition, not the job search. And job acquisition is kind of like a war of attrition. You are going to get a hell of a lot more rejection than you will get approval. It's just the way that it works. Like here is what the job acquisition funnel looks like. And at each stage, the odds are stacked against you. And when you're submitting your resume up here, where you're competing with thousands and hundreds of people, good luck getting a human to talk to you, but you want to speak to the humans. And the way you speak to the humans is through building relationships. Sorry, there was one of my dogs coming in. I told you I'd get some guests. Cool. Other questions? And I can go into like whatever topics. I can stop sharing my screen here. If I can find the right button to stop sharing it. Stop sharing there. Nicole, I see that you have your hand up. I think we're connected too. I think I saw you reach out to me today.
Yes, we are. So yeah, you said you hired tons of people. What would you be what do you generally look for with a junior developer that's fresh out of a boot camp? Besides, like their GitHub or portfolio, like what would really make someone that is, fresh to the scene kind of stand out above the rest, other than like, hi guys, can I have a job? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I won't be able to, I've never looked at anyone's GitHub. I barely know what that is. My kid plays with it. So I can't tell you anything on the technical side. But a big part of it is really coming in with someone saying something kind about you. We're saying, hey, this woman, Nicole, is a good person. You should talk to her. Because my hunch is your GitHub and your portfolio is good. But I'm sure there's lots of other people that have good stuff. There are ways to prepare for the interview. I do advise people taking as many interviews as possible. For technical interviews, there's some good ways to practice. I think there's a site called interviewing.io where you can do some practice there. I think there's some other research. You stumped me on the technical side, but for getting in the door and being considered, you like ideally you get a reference, and also besides just a reference, talk to people at the organization and ask them, what's the interview process like here at Block? You can do some research online, you can do some mock interviews, but also doing real interviews will be so invaluable. So take any interview you get, even if you're not interested, even if the compensation is not what you want, take the interviews. You can go all the way to the end, and you can always say no, but you want to practice so that you get comfortable, so that when you get that interview at Google or whatever company that you're seeking, you are not nervous for that. So I can't advise on the technical side. Sorry, that's out of my element.
Alan, Nicole does have, if I can sort of add on to that question, because that's also something that Valerie had asked earlier today. So if someone wants to start at a specific role, it doesn't have to be a tech role, right? So think about marketing, think about data analysis, think about project management, and they have 0 years of experience. How do they get their foot in the door?
Yeah. So networking is a big one. There's also other ways through contractor roles. So a lot of these companies have contractor or temp roles. Google used to call them TVC, temporary vendor contractor. So you can get in that way. There's some opportunities sometimes to do apprenticeships or internships. There are some organizations that do work with formerly incarcerated individuals. There are some programs like that. You're probably more aware of that than I am. There's ways to get in that way. And you take whatever you can get. And there are other roles too. So if you're looking for a coding role, like a SWE role, a software engineering role, maybe you take a role in DevOps, or maybe you take a role in tech support, or something that might be a little bit more less complex for you, but you want to get your foot in the door in the company. Because I heard Irene talking about it, I think at the tail end. It's a lot easier to move around once you're in the walls than when you're outside the walls. So you take anything that you can get. When I tried to get into baseball, I took an internship working for the Brooklyn Cyclones, and I was counting inventory in their back room, counting hats and jerseys and things like that, which I was kind of bored off my ass with, but it got me in the door. And then that opened up an opportunity for me to be director of promotions eventually at the New Haven Ravens, farm team of the Toronto Blue Jays, which sounds great, but wasn't that actually great of a job. But it got my foot in the door. So get your foot in the door, focus on the companies, cast a wide net, build relationships within those companies, have conversations with those companies, and find out what sort of programs and opportunities there are for people with lack of experience to get in the door. And different companies have different programs.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Are there other questions, other topics to talk about company cultures, using LinkedIn, networking. I can talk about the tech landscape. I can talk about any of the tech companies, what's going on there, if people have questions about that. Really want to make sure that I'm addressing your questions and what's on your mind. I see John with a hand up.
Yes, sir. I was just wondering, so I'm currently a college student, and like networking, it's a little confusing at times because some of the feedback I've got from people is like really hone on like the people around you and like your college and things like that in terms of building your network, but then also hone on like older people who are already graduated and established like in their professional lives as a way to get a foot into companies after graduation. And I just wondered your thoughts on that, and if you thought maybe there was some sort of percentage of 60% to your current peers around you and 40% to people who already graduated, or if there's any advice you had on that topic there.
Yeah, so anybody at any age could potentially help you. So ideally, what I suggest for people to do is first establish what sort of company you want to work for, create a list of those companies, 40, 50, 60 companies deep. I know that sounds like a lot, but you can look at lists like LinkedIn has a list of the top 50 companies to work for. Glassdoor has a list of the top 100 companies to work for. If you go to my website, I have a list of the top 100 companies that I recommend working for. You look at those companies. Then you start looking on LinkedIn and you see if you know anyone there. Or first you like rack your brain. You're like, oh, does my Uncle Joe happen to work at, I don't know, name a company or two, John, that you would like to work for.
I haven't dove into that too much. Probably, I'd say Deloitte or Google.
Okay, so Deloitte or Google. So maybe, I'm guessing Do you know anyone there? Maybe not. Okay. But then you start playing around on LinkedIn and you start seeing what commonality you have of someone that works at Deloitte. So Deloitte has lots of employees there. And you talk to anybody. You have family members, you have relatives, you have friends that may have some lead to there, or even in the industry. And you just start talking to them. And I have a list of questions that I can share as well that I would recommend. All you want to do is you want to seek advice. And you're not asking for a job, but you're really seeking advice. And I can share my screen again with a list of some of these questions. And I think you're recording this, right, Archana? So let me, can you see my screen, or do I need to blow this up? Okay. So ideally, when you're having, like, you start talking to people. So if you can't find someone at Deloitte and Google, just talk to someone in the consulting business, talk to someone in the tech business. Ideally, you have a Zoom call, if not in person, if not phone. Email and text is worst. You don't want to be transactional. You want to get them face to face, ideally for 30 minutes. When you have that, make sure that you confirm 24 hours before, because it's going to be a more important meeting for them than it will be for you. You don't want to waste your time in showing up and they're not there. You want to build some rapport first. You want them to like you. Again, like Dale Carnegie's book, it's about, his book is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's what you're trying to do. Tell them a little bit about yourself, 3 minutes or less. Have them, well, let's not talk about the roles at this point, and thank them for their time. And then in terms of the questions that you want to ask them, here are 7 questions to ask. Can you tell me about your path to Deloitte or to whatever company? And just listen to how they got there. Secondly, what advice do you have for me, for someone who's trying to get there? And they will give you some of that advice. Based on the very little info that you know about me, where do you think my skills might play within this organization? They may have that information or not. If they do, they need to say, hey, do you know anybody on that SRE team that I could potentially talk to? And then you say, hey, I'm super excited to work at Deloitte, but I'm also thinking about these 5 other companies. And ideally have companies that are in the same realm. So you don't want to say Procter & Gamble and Burger King. And you want to, like, if it's Deloitte, you want to say like Accenture and maybe McKinsey and maybe Slalom or whatever. You want to like show that there's some method to your madness, and you come up with 5 companies and you're like, hey, what do you think about these companies? And when you say that to them, it might spark in their mind that, oh, I know this guy, Steve, over at Accenture. Maybe you should talk to Steve. And then also, besides those 5 companies, are there other companies I should be thinking about? So then you start to build your list further. And if they mention other companies, you can say, oh, do you know anyone who works at, I don't know, like BCG or something like that? And then this is important. Is there anything you can do for them? So even though there's probably nothing that you can do for them, just by offering them that, you will gain a lot of rapport, the power of reciprocity, the fact that you're offering something, even though 98% of people will say nothing, they will appreciate that. So those are 7 questions that I recommend. And you start small. So even if you don't know people at Deloitte, you don't know people at Google, if you know people at any companies that are potentially interesting, you can ask them these questions and you come to them with a list of 5 other companies, and maybe they know someone at those companies. And you don't put them on the spot and say, hey, can I reach out to them? Yeah, well, you say, well, you can ask them, is it okay if I reach out to them? And if they're hemming and hawing, don't push. But if they're like, sure, I'm happy to put you in touch with them, then great. And then you begin to continue to build your relationship. And every time you're meeting with someone, connect with them on LinkedIn. Thank them on LinkedIn, and your network on LinkedIn will get bigger and bigger. My network wasn't always 26,000 deep. It started with 1 person, actually with Columbia Business School in 2004. That's when I first learned about LinkedIn. And my first connection were some people in my class. So You got to start small, talk to people in this group, talk to other people and have conversations with them. And I bet someone in this group of 25 people knows someone at Deloitte or knows someone at Google, and especially JTC alumni. That's a great thing, actually. That could be one of your strong, like JTC has been around for several years, right, Archana? Yeah, and a lot of them have moved on to companies. So that's actually probably better. Brian, I forget the name of that college, but if you look at people through Justice Through Code that are now at companies, I bet they're going to be super helpful in terms of being willing to talk to you and talk about the challenges that they went through and offer you advice on how to overcome some of those. So commonalities, or the town that you came from. That's another good thing. If you came from a small town, that's another commonality. And Adam Grant, who I referred to before, talks about the power of uncommon commonalities. So sometimes even if you have the same first name, that could work. It's weird, like or if you see that they're a big Indians fan and or actually they're called Commanders now. You see someone's a big Commander fan, or if you're friends with someone on Facebook or some other social platform and you friend them on LinkedIn and you see that they are working at a company, again, it's not asking for a job, but it's building the relationships. So I don't know if that answers the question, John.
No, great answer. Thank you. Especially, I really like that that last question. So then, like you said, it's not as transactional. I'd say it doesn't seem like you're just pulling and not giving anything back. So I really like that one.
Yeah, cool. I'll stop sharing here. I think we only have 5 minutes left, right, Archana?
We do, yes.
And everyone can connect with me. I'll tell you, like I do give a lot of career advice and information. I will not be able to take one-on-one conversations because I just get inundated with them, but I do offer a lot of free master classes. I have a lot of free information on our YouTube channel. I give a lot of, I have a podcast as well. So there's lots of free stuff I give. I just don't have a lot of time for one-on-one conversations, but I like doing these group sessions where I can talk to lots of people.
I was just thinking about something that Alan said, everyone, which is about, being on LinkedIn and leveraging LinkedIn, right? So another way of sort of being on LinkedIn is, once you have your profile, you've set up your experience, your education, you have a little summary about yourself, you start to explore your community, right? So many of you, for example, are following Alan. Alan's pretty active on LinkedIn. He leaves a lot of comments. He is himself following a lot of people. And it's always helpful to, sort of see what kinds of posts Alan's commenting on. If it's something that connects with you. And if it connects with you, you could always like his post, or even better, you'll see comments to his post from other people. And this is a great way for you to comment on their comments. So this way you're having a conversation that's kind of authentic with other people, other like-minded people that you don't know at all. And before you know it, they've liked your comment. And then before you know it, they're actually connecting with you, or you're in fact, reaching out and connecting to them. Of course, anytime you do connect to someone, always write a note, hey, love that comment. So glad we connected over this post from Alan or someone else. So it's a very easy way to build your network. It's also a very easy way to learn. There's so many topics out there that are of interest to you outside of coding. And this is, again, a great way for you to pick up on those topics and to leverage those topics in a way to help, grow your horizons.
Yeah, great point, Archana. Don't follow what I'm doing on LinkedIn because I'm using LinkedIn for a different purpose. But I think what Archana is referring to, I do comment on people's posts. And it's amazing the conversations I'm able to have, that I'm able to take them from LinkedIn offline. So, but you don't need to follow what I'm doing there because I'm trying to do it for a different purpose and find a job. 2 years ago, you could have followed what I was doing on LinkedIn. Now I'm trying to build an audience and followership there. But there tools to automate posts, that's not what you're trying to do. You're really trying to build authentic relationships here. It's not about building your followers. I'm trying to build followers. It's for a different reason. You're trying to build connections and build relationships that can help open a door or give you insight and advice. And I put a link to a video that this master of LinkedIn, he used to work at LinkedIn. Now he works at Khan Academy, which is another great resource. And he talks about how to use LinkedIn effectively to leverage it for what you're worth. But what Archana says, spot on. You comment, you support people, they start seeing you. And then when you see something, like they will be more likely to be willing to help you out. But yeah, don't do automated posts. First off, LinkedIn will kick you off if they find out. And secondly, I don't know what your intent would be for that necessarily. I think what you're really trying to do is build authentic relationships online that then you can migrate offline, because those offline could be a video chat like this, but it's not about, like, there are people that are trying to build followership on LinkedIn. If you're trying to find a job, I don't think, like, there are some people that say that you should do that on LinkedIn. I think you should be building relationships that you can eventually take offline for a video chat.
The great thing about JTC, Amanda, is that you will have different people with different points of view come in, and you have the great advantage of making up your mind and choosing what to do. Yeah,
Like you don't need to follow my advice. Like the dude says, I forget the exact quote, but like, that's your opinion, man. So you can choose my opinion, and you could use whatever path that you want. But I think what you're trying to use LinkedIn for, I think many of you here are trying to land a job and build your careers. So I don't think automated posts are necessarily going to get you there. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I agree. This has been a fantastic session. Alan, thank you so much. And for the many things you said you don't know, there's so much more that you do. Alan's also great to follow on LinkedIn. He's there to, again, like if you do reach out to him, if it's not one-on-one, but of course he has great resources for you to learn from. So, look forward to all of us building our community, building our connections on LinkedIn. This is definitely not a sponsored post by LinkedIn, even though it sounds like it.
No, I don't work for LinkedIn. I've interviewed there several times. I never got in, but I do have lots of friends there.
Yeah, but everyone, I know it's getting late in the night. Really appreciate everyone's attention today. Lots of great questions. Alan, thank you so much, especially on a cold night in Brooklyn. And I will talk to everyone soon again. All right.
Thanks, Archana. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate what you're all doing. Bye.